Yeah, we're live. Hi, guys.
To control the banking, which they did for the Templars, and they wanted to turn from the inside the Roman Church into
Mimi!
to the new Babylon, preparation for the Templar dream of universal government under this universal religion in the new Babylon.
Mimi!
These are their terms. Even though we have it prophetically, they have their own views on the end time, similar but a different outcome at the end, obviously. Slightly a little bit different timetable. But nonetheless, that was the goal of the Templars. So these 33 sit down with the Pope, and the Pope says, I'll do it, but not the way you want me to do it. None of you are going to be involved. I'll have my own, likely black nobility.
Aloha and welcome back to another show, guys. I'm beyond excited to introduce today's special guest, Gary Wayne. He is the brilliant mind in the world of biblical mysteries. He's the best-selling author of Genesis 6 Conspiracy and the Genesis 6 Conspiracy Part 2. Gary's work dives deep into the ancient biblical narratives, uncovering incredible connections between the Nephilims, the fallen angels, the bloodlines of the elite, all while shedding light on the coming last days. And today we're going to explore just that. Before we dive in, don't forget to follow, review, and share the podcast. As we continue bringing these deep and sometimes controversial discussions, I want to make sure that we can keep this content uncensored. That is why I'm starting a Patreon soon, where you will be able to access exclusive videos and early releases. Your support there will help ensure we can discuss these sensitive topics openly without restrictions. So stay tuned for more information on how you can be part of that. Now, without further ado, let's welcome Gary Wayne to the show. The last time we had you on, we dove into some fascinating topics like the Adamites, unicorns, a little bit of secret society, and that was a huge hit with our audience.
Was it?
Today? Yeah. So today I'd love to dive deeper into your latest work, again, Genesis 6 Conspiracy Part 2. I'd like to start with the chapter 11 of your new book regarding the rebellious angelic plan right from the outset. I think you reference Isaiah 14, where Satan's plan was to establish a counterfeit realm, independent from God's law and oversight. So can you expand on Satan's ultimate goal? And it wasn't to defeat God, but to rule separately with the realm. You said something about with the Nephilims within the firmament.
Yeah, not quite sure I understand the question. I understand the original rebellion and the fall of Satan in Isaiah 14. Not sure about the Nephilim within the firmament aspect of that question. So maybe link that a little bit more, and maybe I'm just complicating it. But
maybe I am. Let me see. Hold on. Sorry. Let me see. Yeah, that's right. I think it was chapter 11. Well,
that's the realm of the Nephilim. So
you say that differently too. You spelt it different.
Oh, so you want to know the difference between the two?
And yes, on that. Yes. tell us.
No, I guess that too, but I think that you mentioned the rebellious angelic plan from the outset, according to Isaiah 14, was to establish a counterfeit realm away from the reach of God and independent of his laws and oversight.
Right. Okay, got it. So
Sorry.
yeah, I think that is one of those key precepts to understand the Bible, the Old Testament, and our world history. So it doesn't matter what belief system you come from, this is something that we need to understand. So another principle that's in the Bible that gets suppressed as part of the full disclosure on the polytheist side is that Satan is the leader of the pantheon. And we get the pantheon below Satan, but we don't get a listing from Satan per se. And so whether or not it is a parent god, let's say like Kronos or Zeus or Ra or Osiris, those are allegories for Satan and the sun god as he's allegorized. And even though they're
Hey, Di, good to see you.
gods ahead of the pantheon, the thing we need to understand is that there is somebody who sits above the pantheon of the seven sort of major wandering stars, as they're understood, or the seven Satans and the seven major gods. And there's actually, depending on how you want to look, expanding that, you can take that to 10 or 12, both before and after the flood, within that pantheon. And so Satan is like the prince of this world. He's the god of the world from the biblical perspective. He sits above a council of gods that's recorded in Psalms 82 and recorded in pretty much all polytheist accountings around the world, that there's a council of the gods, whether it's at Mount Olympus, whether or not it's at Mount Hermon, whether or not it's at Nippur. It's where the ring lords are crowned as well, and the assembly of the ring lords, and the assembly in the Ugaritic text of the assembly of the Tanu, or the Titan giants that are serving the higher invisible ones, so to speak. And so that ring lord and council of the gods, that's the senior and the junior order, and the hierarchy has Satan sitting above that. So that is a Hebrew word in Psalms 82 that is Ida, which is a different word than the assembly that's used in Isaiah 14, which has a more modern translation to it as the language has evolved, that we would say as Moed. But as I explained in a few different parts early on in the book, there's transliterations and there's different soundings to vowels depending on the consonant. And there's a parallel thing that happens in Hebrew as what happens in Greek with the changing the word from an I or a hard G to a Y sound, or a silent sound, like the I-N in Hebrew. So the original Hebrew word would be moged as a first versus moed, and then the evolution with the I-N, which is a little apostrophe that sort of shows up there, it silences that hard G. And I explain all of that in detail, how you get there, because it's a little bit too deep into the minutia for a show, which we can do, but I think I would get people bored as I go through all the interesting things of languages and things. But so two different words that are used for the council of the gods. One that God is sitting at the assembly with his throne above the loyal order of angels, El, in the lowercase versus L in the uppercase. And L is the Hebrew word for an angel or a god. And so the council that Satan sits above, that's
hence Kal-El in Superman. His name's Kal-El.
recorded in Psalms 82, the word Ida, he sits on that throne as a counterfeit of the assembly in heaven. But this one is on earth, maybe in another dimension, or on a specific mountain. Likely Mount Hermon, as Nippur and Mount Hermon of the Middle East cultures and the Sumerian cultures are the same location for the mountain, just as the Epic of Gilgamesh has him going to the cedar forest to kill the terrible one that was given that commission by the gods of that council to hurt humankind, be a terror to humankind. And that cedar forest is on Mount Hermon. And so that's where likely the council of the gods is located. And that this council of the gods is run by what they call gods, as in Elohim, plural for El, singular case, and sons of the Most High, sons of God, El Elyon. Just as it's the same language for the sons of God in Genesis 6, or the sons of God in Job 1, 1:6 and 2:1, and in 34 or 38 4-7, where the morning stars and the sons of God before the rebellion rejoiced at the creation of the physical world that Satan would lead a rebellion in, and that Satan in his rebellion not only tried to invade heaven, but tried to establish his own council of gods in his own realm, but away from the oversight from God. So in this case, it's Halel ben Shakar in Isaiah 14, which is, we would understand, Lucifer, son of the morning, in a KG version of the translation, which is an Italian word substituted for a Hebrew word into the English language. And it happens to be the god of the Freemasons. So, I mean, people can do with what they want with that, but it should have been translated as Halel, son of the morning, right? Just as you have Michael translated as Michael, not the meaning of the name, or Gabriel. But so that's, and there's lots of reasons why they say they did that, none of them good, because it's not consistent with how they did the other translations. So it's Halel. It's probably the morning star name for Satan as part of his many titles and attributes, just as in Ezekiel 28, when he is described as being the anointed cherubim in Eden. That name, as an angel in Eden that's deceiving Eve in the book of Enoch, is Gabriel, not Halel. So different name, different attribute, if you make that sort of connection, and that means wall of God or God's wall. And again, ends in Yel. So, and it has, Hebrew roots to it, that you can actually trace that word Gabriel back to those two words. Gad is in wall, El is in God or angel, right? Just as Azazel has an El on the end of it. And so, just for another example, as you could look at in the Midrash and the Talmud in Jewish mysticism, they give Satan in his seraphic form or seraphim form, in the serpent form, the dragon form, as he's called in Revelation 12. They give him the name Samael for that attribute, right? And that's where that comes from. And whether or not that's accurate or not, but the pattern is a different name for different title. And so he would have had maybe up to 7 names and titles, maybe more. So something to keep in mind is that this is an angel that is above all the other angels. And he's the leader of all the angels. And you don't have sin in the world until pride enters his heart, right? And so it may not be mitigated as sin until the time of Adam, until the time of the first law, as we're told in the New Testament. But there was a rebellion that went on, and clearly the angels had rebelled by the time of Adam, because you have the Nahash working on behalf, the Nahash serpent, preferred being of the seraphim angels, the watchers, working on behalf of Satan, known as a serpent as well, but the leader of the rebellion and leader of the fallen angels. And they're using this being to deceive Adam and Eve so that they don't reach their destiny. So this is what is going on in this after interplay of this reference to Isaiah 14 is that that's the consequences of that rebellion that's recorded in Isaiah 14 and Ezekiel 28, in other words, when he fell from heaven. And we know that that's Satan, and it's not some other being, as a lot of people would portray, because Jesus stated in Luke 10:18, he saw Satan fall from heaven. It says Satan falls from heaven in Isaiah 14 and in Ezekiel 28. And in both cases, we'll head to the abyss, just as Revelation 20 talks about it in the end time. So the same being, and that he is trying to raise his throne to be like God. That's interesting terminology, which means he didn't think he could destroy God. He didn't think that he could probably defeat God. That God would still be there, but he wanted to be like God, sitting on his own council of gods, but away from God's oversight and reach. And so the rebellion, I think, is rooted in that, as opposed to thinking that they could actually defeat God, because the angels were created immortal with intimate knowledge of God, versus humans created mortal with very limited knowledge of God. And angels rebelled anyways, even though they knew God intimately and they knew how powerful he was. They understood he is the Alpha Omega. They understood he's all powerful, yet they still rebelled. But I think they were trying to play on God's mercy and goodness to say, okay, I understand you disagree, and you can have this place on your own. I think that's what they were trying to accomplish. God kind of does that, but not in the way that they had hoped. And so Satan does become the god of the earth, the prince of this world. He does establish his own council, but he's not away from the reach and the parameters of the God Most High. So it's not full distancing. And so the only thing that they can do in response to that is to try and prevent the Adamites from reaching their destiny to be raised up like angels, to be the inheritors of eternity. And in doing so, if he can destroy or have the humans destroy them.
Diane, they would have made that in secrecy, yet no other nation picked it up.
Themselves from the face of the earth, then that would justify their rebellion. And so I think all of that is in play when we talk about this interesting prophecy in Isaiah 14, which is a very unique kind of prophecy. And there are other ones that I talked about in book.
I can't see Russia sharing their knowledge on that missile.
To that.
Oh, I bet they'd give it to China.
Or the same MO or pattern, and they're important. And what they do is they tell important information about prehistory, apply it to what's going on in the time of the prophet with prophecies for the time of the prophet. But not all of those prophecies are fulfilled, but they are prophecies for the end time, either with Satan or Antichrist or both, that are yet to be fulfilled. So in Isaiah 14, as you read on, the Assyrian is going to be destroyed on the mountains of Israel, but not to the same degree in the details of what happens to that Assyrian and how that connects to the serpent's root. That's part of the same prophecy. And some other details about going down to the pit prison for Satan and the Assyrian, and the terrible ones that are also talked about in a quick reference in Isaiah 13, which is the first part of that prophecy. So Isaiah 13 and 14 are not separate prophecies. They're the same. We have to keep in mind that only in the Middle Ages were the chapters set up. And they're a bit arbitrary, which is why they don't tell a complete narrative in each one, right? And so that one is an extension. Isaiah 13 and 14, read that as the same prophecy. And you'll see more end time prophecies and more prehistory in there as well, particularly as it goes into Babylon and its destruction in the end time in Isaiah 13. And so Hallel is also interesting as well, because in that definition for Hallel is an interesting little anecdote that says Hallel, Helel, is a derivative of it in Hebrew for the king of Babylon that's being talked about in Isaiah 13 and 14, that has a similar destruction as Antichrist, but has it plays a role in the time of the prophet. So, and in this case, you have the Hallel as the king of Babel or Babylon. You could look at Babel first, or Babel that follows the Assyrian Empire with Nebuchadnezzar, as it's going to affect the southern kingdom versus the northern kingdom of the Assyrians. That's also mentioned. So you have King of Babel and the Assyrian, which are Antichrist allegories as well. That's a derivative of Hallel ben Shakar. And so it's just a wonderful prophecy that I try and explain in different parts. You could almost write a mini book just on Isaiah 13 and 14. In fact, I think I have a 7-part series I have that I supply for people if they want to go through it in an in-depth detail. So that's the prehistory that is still with us to this day and has affected our history. And that this Council of the Gods that has been set up was also set up with the Council of the Giants in the Assembly of Titanu, as the Ugaritic text calls it. And another allegory for it would be in King Arthur's Grail stories, the round table. It's the ring. It's the ring lords. It is the same sort of allegory and bloodlines, who are the visible ones who run this earth for the invisible ones. So I get into that understanding of the Nephilim versus the Nephilim. So Nephal is the root word for Nephil, and they're the singular versions. And Nephal, as in fallen one or fallen ones, would be Nephilim. That's the word that is used for Isaiah when he falls from heaven in Isaiah 14. The Nephilim are the fallen ones, where we get the term fallen angels for, or the fallen ones of the Shemayim, which is the Hebrew word for the heavens. So, or the heavenly ones, as you could translate it both ways. And you don't get the singular form in the Bible, but that would be Shema as the Hebrew singular form. And so these are the fallen ones of the heavenly ones, the Shemayim, the Nephilim of the Shemayim, right? And that's the host of heaven and the host of the rebellious ones, which is the Hebrew word Saba, or an army of angels on both sides, which has rank and order and a hierarchy to it. And so you have a counterfeit Saba host that we're told not to worship in the Old Testament, that are associated with the planets and the stars as allegories, just as stars are another word that is used for angels in the Old and the New Testament. And so we're told not to worship that celestial host or the heavenly host, the Shemayim, the heavenly one's army. Only these are the Nephilim, these are the fallen ones. And so this is the organizational structure that works as the invisible ones with their spurious offspring. The Nephilim receive the divine right to rule from as the royales, or the kings of God, as you take that back in its etymology, or in Latin Rex Deus, as I use in book 1. Al being a transliteration in the Middle East for El, just as Il or Ilu. It's the same word, just a different transliteration. So we see that in Baal, Lord God, or Master God, depending on how you want to translate that. And they use that to substitute Baal into the Bible in the secret societies as Lord God. They just love to use the English language on the interpretive side as a weapon of terror and a weapon of control and deception. And so Nephilim is rooted in the Hebrew word Nephilim, as an extension of. Some of that meaning passes on, and they're fallen ones as well, but they're distinctly different as demigods, as the offspring of the fallen ones, Nephilim, of human males and females, and polytheism.
Sorry, I had
only
to
get
do
that
something.
biblically with men that we can actually point directly to of women to produce these.
Hey, Dave, good to see you, mate.
So biblically, just if I wasn't clear on that, fallen angels, human females, but in polytheism, it's both the goddesses with human males and the gods with human females to produce the demigods or the giants, and these are the Nephilim. So they carry on part of that, but Nephilim is clearly described as giant, tribe of giants, tyrant, and bully. And tyrant and bully should not be understood in how they've separated the term from giants. To say, well, bullies aren't giants. Well, bullies are giants. That's where the root is rooted in. So when we see in Mount Hermon, there's a district in there that's called Bashan, and it was the kingdom where King Og reigned from on Mount Hermon. And there is passages throughout the Old Testament.
It's the bulls of surround cross Christ. What bulls?
And about the bulls of Bashan.
Yeah, he says the bulls of Bashan surround me. Not in the Bible, in some other text I read.
And they're there actually taunting Jesus while he's being crucified in the book of Psalms. Bulls in the Ugaritic text in Samaria.
Oh, there you go. I heard it from Gary.
Elsewhere around the world was a common understanding for gods.
Come on.
Part of the bull cult, right? That I talked about extensively in book 1. And their offspring are also called bulls, just as Gilgamesh is called a bull in Sumeria, and the Rephaim and all the members of the assembly of the Tanu in the Ugaritic text are also called bulls. That's where, and they're terrible people. They're the terrible ones, the Eretim. And so that's how you relate the original word back to that's talking about gods or giants. And then tyrant goes back to tyrannos and Tarwanos in Hittite Indo-Aryan, as they adopted the Indo-Aryan language, the Hittites. And these are describing these horrible, terrible ones who are Gyges kings, or Gyes with that Y again, when you have a E following a G in this case in the Greek, which is the root word for Gygus, which means giant. These are giant kings. And the Gyges kings and the Gyes king, the dynasties, which were in Assyria, they were in Asia Minor, they were throughout Greece, and they extended up the Danube River. These were the bloodline of the Cretagens, which is rooted in the Greek word for Crete. And the Cretazans is the Zeus bloodline. And so the Zeus bloodline with Elkmeni produces Hercules, and the Gyge kings are the bloodlines of Hercules, or the Herculides. So that word goes back to giant kings as well. So don't let people give you disinformation. They're only giving you part of the information, and they use that to deceive people. So these are the invisible ones that have their own secret assembly. So one presumes there's still that worldwide assembly. I don't clearly state that in book 1 or 2, but because I don't have physical evidence of that. But one presumes with the bloodlines, they have this greater assembly that I do refer to, which is different than the 13 families of the West, that there's supposed to be a 13 families of the world that heads this assembly of bloodlines. But again, I've not been able to get documentation on that, but it sets up on that same sort of MO. So this is the ones who are ruling this world today for the invisible ones on the earth, and all the secret societies are rooted in giant creation and the Canaanite bloodlines. So if we want to understand how the world works,
I got real life insurance to protect us financially. You can choose up to $2 million cover. Click to request a quote now.
For as long as you both shall live.
I do.
You may power her up.
Oh, Lord, there, it's so good to see you.
At Hammond Care, we've been caring for people for more than 90 years.
you have to understand how the rivalries between these bloodlines have been there ever since. And they're like,
Hey guys, good to see you, mate.
two traits is their despising of humanity and perpetual war. And these are the royals and the larger elite. And that they were created as terrible ones to destroy humankind from the face of the earth, so that they wouldn't reach their destiny, and so that the fallen angels wouldn't get blood on their hands. They're using their spurious offspring to do their beckoning. You do not get any accounts biblically or closely related to the Bible accounts, whether it's the Quran or other types of apocrypha, where you have fallen angels slandering the God Most High. You get humans who are deceived and the spurious bloodlines that do it. And that's why I have is one of my other underlying reasons that Antichrist will be of the bloodlines, because he will be a slanderer of God, unlike anything that we've seen since Nimrod after the flood. And so probably akin to an antediluvian counterpart.
Wow, that was incredible. And I know that there's a lot of, uprising with the East now coming to the West. You know, the Indians, the Persians, all of that too, right? China.
Yeah, it's
See, they're too scared to say Muslim. Even on Gary Wayne's show, she's too scared to say Muslim.
They talk about the BRIC nations, but it's not sort of fully evolved. That one should expect 5 groups of nations, likely all from the East. But that doesn't mean you couldn't get, South America as a group of nations, as we see what's going on in Brazil and Colombia and Venezuela and other things that are going on there, that couldn't become an EEC-like community that would be working with China. So it's interesting because when we look at Daniel 2, which is the metallic empire prophecy, you have 10 toes of 10 rulers that are going to rise in the end time.
Yeah.
And Antichrist will rise amongst them. And it's
Diane, how does he get a license to still trade as a CEO if he's been bankrupted over his casinos? Because we know he has been. So how come in Australia, you break the law like that, you can't be a CEO for I think it's 7 years. You can't partake in a stock take at all.
particularly clear in Daniel 7 and Daniel 8, where it moves to the beast empire.
The stock market, I meant.
And that he will rise after the 10 horns or the 10 kings. And you have the same allegory being described of these beast empires rising out of the Gentile sea nations in Revelation 12, 13, and 17, with the same 10 kings, 10 horns, the 7 great empires, even though we're only shown 5 of those in the Daniel. You have to count for 2 before. And then in a parallel prophecy in Daniel 8, you can take that back to, which provides more details about Antichrist and how prophecy was going to fulfill. You have in Daniel 8 a prophecy of Alexander as an Antichrist-like figure, a wannabe, and he creates the Greek beast empire, which is recorded in the metallic empires as the bronze, the leopard in Daniel 7. And when he dies, or is assassinated, is poisoned, he has his empire split up into 4 parts, right? And Rome is part of that. And you have these 4 kings that are going to rule over and continue on in that Greek dynasty until Rome takes over. And so Antichrist comes out of this empire, as it talks about in that Beast Empire, not necessarily Greece, because it could include Persia as well, because that's part of the Greek Empire. And it succeeded the Greek Empire. And so if you count that, now you're at 5, Alexander 4, Rome is 6, and you're at the same number with the 7th Empire in the end time versus Assyria and Egypt being the first 2 beast empires using Daniel 7. So same type of imagery with the beast empires, but giving you a little bit more detail and some very intriguing detail that I do cover off in book 2 about Daniel 8. So, and as it applies to Antichrist. And so when we look at these groups of nations, expect 10 groups of nations with empires or emperors running those groups of nations that will form a overall world empire.
You guys know, I think Trump is one of the 10 kings. I think he's going to rule over the American sector.
That Antichrist will take control of at the midpoint of the last 7 years. So Daniel 2 then gives us some very important information, and you could interpret this a couple of different ways. I would probably suggest all of the ways, because that's kind of how the Bible works, but don't overextend and put additional meanings into interpretations as you understand it, because you have to be able to back that up biblically and not have any contradictions. So that would be if you have another one to be added. So when it has 2 legs of the first Roman Empire, which is the iron, and then you have the 10 toes, which is iron and clay, you have an analogy of an unpure metal because it's forged versus gold versus silver. You start to get impurities with bronze, but it can also make it stronger. It just won't be as pure, and that's why iron is so strong with that sort of forging. So look for Scion bloodline.
I saw Alex Jones post today, Trump is about to do something huge, and they're all hinting that he's going to get rid of the IRS. That's what they're hinting at.
Lines to make that stronger from an iron perspective. And then clay is associated with the Adamites. As you take Adam back to Hebrew, as red clay. And so you seem to have a human aspect, which could be mixing of human bloodlines with these descendants of the beast empires or Raphaim post-Diluvian giants. And we get that in Daniel 2:43, where the descendants of these 6 empires forms the 7th empire, and they will mix their seed with that of humans in the King James Version. And so you could understand that as that mixing of iron and clay. Or you could also look at that as these.
Yeah, Dave, we don't buy into Trump. Every now and then when he does good things, I sort of loosen up on him, but the fact is, it's not going to end well.
Kings will possess a spirit, and maybe humans will have that additional spirits put into them as well as in demon spirits to give them more strength to become emperors. I explained that, but it's the physical attribute of the text that I would focus more on. I don't rule out demon possession because you have these things coming out of the pit prison in Revelation 9 in time for that war, for the God war before the midpoint of the last 7 years of Gog being a giant name, Magog being a giant name, and referencing some of these groups of nations that we're also talking about that are going to be part of this counterfeit Armageddon that Antichrist will use as his credentials and declare he won the war to become the false Messiah at the midpoint of the last 7 years. So when we look at those 10 kings, you could have a mix of giants, you could have giants being recreated, you could have descendants of giants, and you can have humans mixed in there, or you could have just human strongmen rise where there aren't those bloodlines and they're going to run those empires. But they're on 2 legs with 5 on each. And it's also possible that those 5 don't mix, right? They can't get along because there's rivalries and they all want to produce the bloodline that's going to run the world. So just as you had the Western bloodlines that created social masonry, which we would understand as communism, anarchism, socialism, national socialism, progressivism, they're all different nuances to social masonry, all rooted in the same thing, was created to create communism, to bring down the Putyanin bloodline in Russia, which we understand as the Romanov bloodline, which was through intermarriage in the 1600s, inherited the Putyanin bloodline through
Diane, I do see it. Just sometimes when some of the things Trump does, it makes me think, yeah, well, that's a pretty good thing to do. So it's, yeah.
Another.
We saw that video that his Trump Tower is a temple to bow. That's all there is to it.
Male patriarch.
I know I sound like I love Trump, but I just like what he's doing. But I do know it's going to end bad.
From a Putyanin female. So she takes the Romanov name, and it's a junior offshoot of the Putyanin. Vladimir the Great established that branch dynasty of Kiev in 1000 AD, and Vladimir Putyanin. And so you might also understand the junior offshoot as in the Plantagenet, which everybody understands a lot of presidents take their bloodlines back to. Plantagenet are a junior offshoot of the Anjou in the same process. And I cover off how that name comes about in book 2 as well. And you can also look at the Anjou as a junior offshoot of the De Vere as it comes down through the lines. And so De Vere is a name that most people aren't all that familiar with, but always keep that as part of one of the Western bloodlines because it's one of the older families of Europe. So when we look at understanding what's going on with social masonry, and I went down another rabbit hole there, sorry, but that communism was also released in China that brought down the Xia bloodline, XIA, or Xi, XI is the other way, and that's the name of the president that's back on the throne there today. So they use that to diminish another royal bloodline that goes back to dragon creator gods in prehistory. They also created National Socialism to take on communism in Russia because it went rogue on them. So they created National Socialism to take care of that. Unfortunately, the Nazis, the National Socialist Worker Party, went rogue on them as well. But that's why there was this obsession with Hitler to attack Russia. That's what he was created to do. And for the Western bloodlines until he decided he had other plans, and then the Western bloodlines funded the Allies to bring down the Nazis. And that ended basically the Kaiser bloodline with World War I and the domino effect and the bringing down of the Kaisers of World War I, and they were able to put in National Socialism to try and take care of communism. You also had communism show up in other countries with all the other same sort of MO around the world, but they usurp power, and basically any bloodline that was associated with it, they're trying to take out. And genocide always follows. And so there's these rivals because the European bloodlines aren't as pure as those other bloodlines. They have a lot more mixing with humans and a lot more.
Yeah, Diane, if I was backed into a corner, is Trump good or bad? You wouldn't even have to get me into a corner for that, because do you remember at his rallies he says, I'm a snake and you took me in and I bit you, what did you expect? All the painting's there. The painting's already on the wall.
Or psioning in to try and bring in more ennobleness, as they would describe itself. The Putyanin or the Basque bloodline or the Xia bloodline would look at that as inferior. But that's why you also had the Basque diaspora.
Yeah, he still does suck me in every now and then, Di.
Because they didn't want to, the Western European bloodlines did not want to give be second fiddle to the Basque bloodlines, who basically say, I don't know what their gens is, I haven't dug that deep in it, but they do call themselves Homo Atlantis. In other words, they're the survivors of the antediluvian world who started Egypt, Sumeria, Asia Minor, and then settled into southern France and northern Spain. So who knows what's going on there, but that seemed to be a rival. So these rivals have been going on, and Western Europeans are the most powerful, and they want to implement their own Nephilim world order on the world, as in world government, in their vision. But you have others like Putin, who is trying to reestablish the Russian dynasty, and he believes, whether it's true or not, that he's a Putyanin from Kiev. And I have a great document on that for people. I do cover a little bit of that in book 2 as well. And you have Putin, you have Xi, who
Right now, get the hard-working 1-ton Deliver 7 diesel auto, backed with a 7-year warranty.
Why choose EasyCant? We're a national alternative healthcare clinic offering same-day, no referral consults for just $9.
who was pushing back hard and saying, and both of them are saying, we're not against this New World Order. We want a bigger place at the table. We don't want your model. So now you have Russia, you have China, you have the Persians all grouping together, and India was originally settled by the Indo-Aryans, which are giants after the flood in the Indus Valley. And they're the Western form of the Indo-Aryans that create the Achaemenid bloodline dynasty of the Persian kings of the Beast Empire. And they have the same gods' names and everything like that as you get into the Indo-Aryan languages and the names for their gods. And the Zoroastrian religion that we would understand that as in the West. But understand Hinduism is the Eastern form of Zoroastrianism. So you see this group forming, and so you've got Iran, which is understood as Persia. It would also include part of Iraq. Whether they're separate or the same, hard to know, but they're the same groups that are working together. And then you have in that alliance, as we look at Ezekiel 38 and 39, we don't have China involved in that war. They get involved in the end time war, and they're probably don't have the same aspirations as what the Russians would want to do. But you have Russia, which is Magog, probably led by the giant god who comes out of the pit prison as a terrible one, who's going to need an Oiketarian, a dwelling place for the spirit, and that he is the chief prince of Meshech, which is the root word for Moscow in its etymology. And that Putin believes that he is a descendant of the Putyanin, the original founder of the Tsar bloodline that the Western Europeans took out. And Kiev.
All these bloodlines are in power. Who's going to blow up first?
Is this holy city. And so you have Meshech, you have Persia in that group, and you're going to see much of that 5 as part of that great war. But understand, the kings of the east aren't listed there, or the Sinim, as we would know them biblically. And so understand that there's this rival group that is putting up their own currency, their own credit cards, their own banking system, like a World Bank system, and everything is being duplicated because they're opposing the Western European position. And so you can have 2 systems that rise up. They may work together, but they'll be like iron and clay, not well, right? Not the
Diane, and some of that auto cue can make it sound really stupid.
be partly strong and partly brittle. That's why you have wars throughout the last 7 years, is that's that brittle nature that is going on there. So yeah, when you look at what's rising today, if you factor in the ancient geopolitical bloodlines, the royales, look at that as the real reasons for all of the wars. And their nature is to have their ones who are loyal to them to also utilize those tributes. So they're pro polytheist, so they're anti-Christian. They're pro universal government. They won't say it out loud, but they want one belief system and they want to impose it. They're doing it through the secular methods, but they'll drop their disguise because secularism is a puppet of polytheism that controls them. And they have perpetual war. That's their nature. So when you look at the establishment of the Republican Party, that always has the same agenda as the establishment of the Democratic Party. That's when they use cattle herding from both sides to push you in the same direction, but they actually have the same policies. They have perpetual war as their policy. If they have world government, universal religion, and socialism, that is their traits. And a hatred of Christians and a hatred of anybody who opposes them, but they look as Christians as the root of all opposition.
Interesting. Oh my gosh. I know recently, maybe a few months back, there was a lot of talk about the red heifer and its connection to both Israel and Islam, especially in the current conflicts of the Middle East. Yeah. Some people believe that the red heifer holds prophetic significance in relation to the end time events, like the rebuilding of the temple. Is there any significance to that? And do you know much about the red heifer?
Yeah, so that all goes back to the laws and sacrifices of the Old Testament, and the sacrifices in particular in the temple or the tent, then the temple. And so the red heifer has to be there. There's other types of bulls. You've heard things about the white bull and things like that. That's all sort of part of that, fulfilling the details for the sacrifices to God, because they want to be able to do that, but they can only do that in the temple, they believe. Although before that, although there was the Ark of the Covenant, that was a dwelling place for Yahweh. If they had the Ark of the Covenant, they could do that in a tent today, but it's doubtful that they're going to have an Ark of the Covenant in the temple, but they'll say we didn't have the Ark of the Covenant in the second temple either, so we can still do it. So that's probably how they'll get around that. But it implies that they have to be in possession of.
Dave, Gary Wayne, the guy talking, he's got a brilliant book called Genesis 6 Conspiracy, and it covers gnomes and warlocks and unicorns, Atlantis. It's really, really interesting stuff. There's something like 90 chapters in it.
The temple to be able to do that sacrifice. And the Islamic communities, particularly the Shia,
Nevada,
and the Sunni, they have end time. I wouldn't.
Nevada's desert, isn't it, Di?
Call it prophecy because it's not in the Quran. It's in their hadith, which is oral commentary passed down by the imams as supposedly what certain imams have said or what Muhammad had said. It seems to be, but there's no veracity to it. But they're different in each of the sects. So they interpret the Quran through each of those hadiths, and they interpret it differently, which is why you have those two sections. You have two different bloodlines running through there. And so from Muhammad in this case, so Fatimid dynasty would be the most famous one that people might be familiar with, that the assassins were related to, that is out there in a lot of entertainment. And the assassins worked with the Templars and provided their organizational structure to the Templars. They brought back to Europe as their structure that became the same structure for all the night orders that were created, and for the same structure for secret societies.
Diane, for the last 12 months especially, Haven't they been taking your food supply? You've had them food stations catch on fire and blow up. You've had shortages. You had chicken farms shut down. They're taking your food supply. You guys are getting attacked more than anyone here.
Yeah, today.
We get the sneaky stuff like the banking crap, where you get the stuff where they go mad on the streets.
So everything, like I say, if you start to get into this, you start to understand things a little bit more clearly as to why things are. It's all sort of interconnected. But because they have two different interpretations versus just sticking with what's in the Quran, or you wouldn't have a lot of that, you wouldn't get the Mahdi, because that's not in the Quran. The Mahdi is the Islamic Messiah. They have different messiahs. They're both called Mahdi, but they're two different, and they're going to war together in how they look at that. So you'll see this explosion of Islam if that comes about. If it comes out exactly as they say, for the most part, I guess it might be prophetic, except that it's not the real Messiah. So it's got to have some misinformation in there. So people will rejoice, apparently, according to the Gnostics, in terms of their understanding of Nostradamus.
I love cheese. I eat a lot of cheese. The three cheeses I like the most, and I put them on crackers. They're really nice.
Unless the Rosicrucian prophet, in his very obscure prophecies, that they'll cheer the one that wins, the world will, but it'll turn out to be even more terrible than the one that was just destroyed. So, yes, we have an end time implication that is going to be played out with Islam.
Dave, I remember that Newcastle earthquake, and what I remember the most is how the ground went like a wave at the beach. It just done this wave thing, like it was a wave, yet it was solid concrete. It looked like it was jelly. It all wobbled like jelly. I'd never seen nothing like it. 9 people died, didn't they?
As well, and that they will do anything in their interpretation of the end time to prevent Israel from doing the sacrifice on the temple. And so a lot of what Hamas had put out there is the preparation in terms of the garments, the dyes, the animals that the Israelis were preparing, or the Jewish rabbis were preparing to begin the sacrifices at the Wailing Wall, or
support for whatever life throws your way. Swiss, here life comes.
Christmas morning surprises are for babies.
Keep your clients coming back again and again.
even worse in the El what is it, Masca Mosque, I think it's called. Anyways, their holy temple there, and that's why they said they launched the attack in October last year. So they used that, whether or not. But what we can say,
Dave, that's exactly how it felt, like sitting in a boat. I was surprised concrete could do that.
For sure, is that the Messianic Jews and the apocalyptic Jews are preparing for their Messiah because they believe in the 10 prophecies, 10 Jubilee prophecies, that they're in the
Dave, I was living at Blacktown when that happened.
Messianic period right now. Now that's not canon, that's from again medieval Jewish alleged prophet. but they believe that last Jubilee ended in 2017, and that we're in that period where the first coming of the Messiah will come, which leaves them open for a deception from Antichrist, who in Daniel 9:27 will permit that sacrifice on a wing or overspreading of the temple, or an extremity, depending on which English translation that you're reading there. And so the notion for that is there another temple, or is that the exact description? It's on a wing of the existing temple that's there. And that in the Josephus description of the location of the temple, it's a little bit closer to the valley. So you could build a wing on to that existing temple to create the Holy of Holies to be doing their sacrifices that they're permitted to do in the first 3.5 years of the last 7 years. Now, for that to happen, not only does Antichrist has to be on stage and relatively unknown to negotiate it, but he doesn't have complete power. So he's answerable at this point to somebody else till he usurps power 3.5 years later. So the only way that you can have that happen then is you have a universal religion. So that has to come first. So we're going to see wars and rumors of war throughout the fig tree generation and the catastrophes that get stronger all the way through. But this becomes more heated if indeed we're in the fig tree generation, and I think that we are, that there's going to be more back and forth on this, and there's going to be a lot more wars. And if Nostradamus is correct, and if the Islamic two largest sects are going to present two dueling Antichrist-like figures, likely it's going to get really ugly in the Middle East at some point in time. And so I think there's some things that still have to happen to make all of this happen. But, some significant wars would change things in a hurry. And if we had a war that destroyed 5% of the population, people would call that apocalyptic. People might even say it's Armageddon, or think it's like it's Armageddon. And then that would imply that 5% of the whole world is destroyed. Well, that's nothing compared to the destruction and the wars that bring about the seal judgments. That's 25% destruction of the world and the people and everything that's in it. The trumpets, the time of this dog war, Joel 1 and 2, Revelation 9, Ezekiel 38 and 39, is 33% destruction. And even in Revelation 6, you have that destruction of 25% is so horrible that you have the kings and the bloodlines and the nobility hiding in their caves, probably underground cities and fortresses, thinking it's the day of the Lord. It's that bad. But the trumpets haven't even come, let alone that destruction. Unless Jesus steps in, all flesh would be destroyed, which is why he steps in when he does. It's time of free choice and things being played out will have come to that end. And that destruction that was reserved for the end time will only get to a point where a fire will only get to a point where it can still be saved, because you don't have another recreation of the earth until after the millennium. So when we look at it from that sort of perspective, then we have to be aware that Jesus said there are multiple antichrists, multiple false prophets, and they're going to be working together as we go through the last generation, but more towards the last part of that generation, however long that generation is, and depending on what you pick for that start date for the last generation.
That's true.
So just to finish it, I know I went down some real rabbit trails there. Sorry, but
no, I love it.
It's all interconnected. So we see economic unions forming, which is the basis for these 10 kings and 10 empires. And we see a group heavily that might end up, and likely at 5, based on Daniel 2, that there's an opposition group that is going to be opposing the Western Europeans. And that the Club of Rome, which was created in the late 60s, was created to accelerate the movement to world government, world religion. And they divided the world into these 10 empires. And the United Nations, and you can Google that, or you can get the map up. Whether or not it ends up being that map isn't because I'm not saying that is prophetic. I'm saying that's how the Western Europeans would like to divide the world up. Other nations will have a say, and it probably doesn't look exactly like that. And the United Nations have a similar map set up for the 10 regions of the world. You can Google that too. And you can't dismiss that from the prophecies and asking the question, are we indeed in the fig tree generation? And I think we might be.
Yeah, for sure. Oh my goodness. Your book also mentioned a lot about the Jesuit order strategically and how they rose to power within the Rome.
Okay, and this is why I wanted to watch this video, to see what he's got to say about the Jesuits. All the other stuff was just noise. I wanted to hear what he's got to say about the Jesuits.
In church, playing a key role in shaping the end time prophecy. I never knew that. Could you elaborate on their influence and why this is so crucial in understanding the prophetic fulfillment?
Yeah, so there's layers to this, like there is with everything the polytheists do. So in 1307, the Knights Templar were brought down. And they were brought down by King Philip the Fair of France and Clement V, as I recall. And they kind of grew jealous and wanted their assets. And most of the wealth after that fled to Switzerland, and some wealth went to Scotland along with a number of adepts. And so another event happens in 1188, and these details that I'm covering off, I probably touch on in book 2, but I cover off in detail in book 1. There was a ceremony at Guiser's Castle of the De Guisers, Normandy Rex Deus or Royals, and they have a cutting of the elm, which is an important tree for their thelemic genealogical tree that I also cover off in the book. And there's a splitting of the elm, a separation of the senior order from the junior order, because in 1187, the Knights Templar lost Jerusalem, and that was their main goal. And so the senior order, which is the senior elder bloodlines, said, we're going to part company because you've lost your way, and weren't there to help in 1307. But these are the ones that become known as the invisible ones, as these elders. And there's 33 of them that are key, that have formed a group that they call themselves the Rosy Cross Order. Now, the Rosy Cross Order is an organization that goes back into ancient history, particularly with the Western bloodlines, and back through King Solomon, building of both temples, and I cover those details in book 1 for people. And that Saint Bernard, which was a Cistercian Gnostic order, and Saint Bernard, who was of the bloodlines and relatives to the 9 founders, and direct relatives to 3 of them, like a nephew, is the second most powerful person of the Roman Church, and he sponsors and carries the day for the argument to create this papal bull for the Council of Troy in 1128. He writes the constitution for the Templars, is their patron, and dons the Red Cross on them, which is an order that was started in 1312 with Constantine coming to power and the Red Cross Order, and goes back through Ormus, which is a mystical group that had the Red Cross, just as you have the Archmasons, which is a Red Cross order that goes back. Okay. Anyways, so this Red Cross order is adopted by the senior order as well as the Rosy Cross Order, because they look at them as the ancient bloodline of that order, right? And so that's how.
That'd be because of the the solar flares, do you reckon, Di? Because they all went out at the same time.
Well, you get the Rosy Cross name. They carry on with the Red Cross, and the Knights Templar disappear for the most part from history. So this Rosy Cross order then is going to show up in Scotland in 1323, first visibly time that we see it. What's interesting is these invisible ones, the senior order, the Council of the Barons, that I call them in book 2, they will organize and they will sit down with the Pope in 1317, and they will try and reestablish the Templars inside the Jerusalem, the Roman Church. And the reason why is they want that organization back in there because their goal was to control the banking, which they did for the Templars, and they wanted to turn from the inside the Roman Church into the new Babylon, preparation for the Templar dream of universal government under this universal religion in the new Babylon. These are their terms that I document, even though we have it prophetically. They have their own views on the end time, similar but a different outcome at the end, obviously, and a slightly little bit different timetable. But nonetheless, that was the goal of the Templars. So
I wish I could play Coast to Coast. I played them once and they didn't copyright, and I played them the next time and they copyrighted. So I don't know what's going on there. But gee, it's got a lot of good content, hasn't it? I wish I could play them.
These 33 sit down with the Pope, and the Pope says, I'll do it, but not the way you want me to do it. None of you are going to be involved. I'll have my own, likely black nobility, still European Rex Deus, but maybe a different agenda through different genses versus the Albi gens. You have the Fabia and the Julia gens of the Italians, and Julia gens is the most important one that goes back to not only Augustus and Caesar and the main
Julius Caesar
families of the original nobility senators that go back to Romulus and Remus, and Ares, the Greek god who is the patriarch for Romulus and Remus and the Roman Empire in their belief system. And so they have genealogies to do this. And remember, there's 2 different black nobilities in Italy, senior and junior. You have a migration out of the Middle East and Phoenicia that are going to go to Florence and Venice, and they're going to become the merchant and banking trade there, which is why people like the Medicis at some point in time after the fall of the Knights Templar have control of
the Medicis. It was one of them that got the painting done on what Jesus looks like. When you see Jesus on Catholic photographs and that, and you see that painting, that's what it is. It's one of the Medici children, and they done his portrait.
The banking arm. And they're going to be the sponsors to the Jesuits being resurrected in the 1800s again, versus the senior bloodline. So anyways, back on track here, but just sort of setting the table. So in 1317, the invisible ones, the 33, they poisoned the Pope. And the reaction from the Vatican is huge, and so they're going to go underground, and that ends the Red Cross Templar Order being resurrected into the Roman Church. But that idea doesn't go away. They want new Templars. That's what they were calling them. They want to do the new Templar Order and the new Templars.
Diane, what a bunch of animals. You know, I don't judge people by their race. I judge them by their religion. And by far the worst one of all is that one. The Hindus don't do this to people. Oh, they're starting to do a little bit of persecution, but it's not part of their text. But hey, the Muslims, they're just running amok. Go in and shoot them all. Get rid of them.
So I have to figure out how they're going to do that. In 1323, they come out visibly when The adepts that escaped from France to Scotland received protection from Robert the Bruce, who had been excommunicated previously by the Pope for murdering his rival in a Catholic church. And so they get protection from the Bruce from the Catholic Church. And they also are going to be sponsored by the Sinclairs, which is the St. Clairs. Just as you have a St. Clair, that is Henry St. Clair, who's the battle partner of Hugh de Payan, first Grand Master of the Knights Templar in the Junior Order was set up.
Thus, I didn't know what I was going to play for the second half of the stream when this runs out. You just gave it to me. You're looking up Eye Atlas, 3-eye Atlas. So I'll look at that after this one, mate. Looks good.
And is of the Norse bloodlines from Normandy, where Geezer's castle is. And this is the Rollo bloodline that changes their name to St. Clair because they named the treaty for settling the war with France and expropriating Normandy in 9/11, 910 to 912. I think it was 9/11. And so they accepted that name. So the Rollo bloodline changes to St. Clair, which becomes transliterated as Sinclair. And with those adepts, they're going to create Freemasonry. And then after that, they create their visible Rosy Cross Order for the senior order to the junior order of the Freemasons in Scotland. And that's your first sort of visible showing of this Rosy Cross Order, which is going to be the New Templars. Now, also in 1317, you have assets that are in Portugal and assets that are in Spain that those bloodlines don't want to fall into the hands of the Pope. They want to keep that for themselves, just as King Philip wanted all of the cash. He didn't want to share it with the Pope. We don't know how that would have worked out in the end, but that money was taken to Switzerland for the most part. Okay, where the Knights Hospital, the Knights of St. John, the White Cross Order of Switzerland, and the flag were located, starting of the first part of the banking that we have today. And so, and a sister order to the Knights Templar, set up in the same organizational structure by the same Pope.
There's a really, really old black and white movie. It's a talkie, and only talkies must have just come in because it's really old. And it's the Rothschilds and how they created their banks. It's just called the Rothschilds, but it's very, very interesting.
Polytheist Gnostic groups that show a rouge of Christianity on the outside, but polytheist at the core, just as the assassins showed Islamic monotheism on the outside, but were polytheist at the core. They're equivalent to the Sufis. That's the religion of that the bloodline group, which is equivalent to the Gnostics, which is why the Templars and the assassins were so easily working together for a certain period of time. And so when we look at those assets, there's an order set up in Portugal and an order that's reestablished in Spain because the Templars are gone. This is 10 years later. So this is the Calatrava order in Portugal. Port of the Grail is the real name for the country that and the Grail bloodline.
Rollo was a Viking too, wasn't he? Well, they were very ungodly.
And the country that the Templars actually brought about. And that's why it was there. But so that's the Calatrava order, but it's the Montesa order that's really important, that takes the wealth of the Templars and puts it like in a trust, so the church can't have it. And in the 1520s, you have a fellow by the name of Francis Borgia, who is the Grand Master of the Montesa order, controlling these assets, and he's part of the black nobility bloodline of the.
There's a whole Netflix series on the Borgias. Pretty good.
Popes of the Borgia Pope.
And they ain't hiding nothing. It's with all the blasphemies you could think of.
And he's a royal Basque in the Spanish court. And yeah, you got all this intrigue that's always going on if you don't know the context behind. And so he's working with the King of Spain to become Holy Roman Empire, which he does. This is Francis Borgia, and they're looking for a way to get control of the Vatican as well. And in fact, you're going to have wars between King Charles and his son with Rome, and it's going to actually bankrupt Rome as you go through the 1500s. And so what happens is this is the time of the Inquisition as well. So a young fellow who is going to become very famous, called Ignatius of Loyola, is going to start off on his mission within the church to change the church from the inside. And he does this through initiations with Mary apparitions, a series of them. And that he is trying to create a movement, but he gets caught up in the Inquisition and is put in prison. And so Ignatius of Loyola has heard him, not Ignatius of Loyola, Francis Borgia has heard him speak, likes his fervor, and so bails him out and then starts to fund his movement. And so between the King of Spain, between Francis Borgia of papal nobility and his own royal bloodlines and power and control of the Montesa order, they're going to move in a series of gambits to have the Jesuits instated into the church to become the New Templars. And that's actually what they call them, is the New Templars. And so their two main goals within there is to get control of the banking, just as the Templars had control of the banking, and to get control of the education, just as they have created through Freemasonry and the Rosicrucians. On the outside, they have created the Rothschilds as bankers, or well in the 1700s, to get control of banking outside the church. And also the Royal Society in 1662 get control of teaching and education outside the church. But the first gambit is to get control of the banking and education within the church and get control of the church again. And so the Jesuits received their papal bulls in a series between 1536 to about 1545, and they could control very quickly of the education and all of the seminary schools. So they get control of doctrines, and the Jesuits interpret everything through the seven sacred sciences, and in particularly the Egyptian slant on it, and the pursuits of thought, and everything that sort of goes with that. And so by 1550, Francis Borgia becomes a Jesuit, leader of the Montesa order, a royale, a papal bloodline, and you're going to have him become the third Grand Master by 1565. By 1572, with the wars that are going on, the King of Spain gets control of the banking, gives it to Francis Borgia, leader of the Jesuits, and he moves that banking to Switzerland to marry up with the Templar banking that was begat after the fall in 1307 by the sister organization, the Knights of St. John, which is why the Swiss flag has the white cross on it. That's originating of all the locations for money in the world for the most part, and we're all off the books. Money is kept, where all the royales keep it. That's why we don't know how much they have. I know when I did research for book one in late 90s, early 2000s, I kept getting a number somewhere between 300 and 500 trillion at that time as a reserve estimate. So you can only imagine what that would look like today. And so people like
300 trillion. What comes after a trillion, guys? A quadrillion?
Gates and Elon Musk and Bezos, they're small potatoes in the real money.
Wow.
That's why the power is held by the bloodline. So now you have the new Templars with the Mary apparitions turn it into the new Babylon within the church, right? And so they get so powerful and start to work against the bloodlines that the royal bloodlines in the late 1700s, early 1800s move against the Roman Church and force them to disband the Templar or the Jesuits, and of course they're out there to take up their assets as well. And so because they are moving more quickly on the agenda, and they don't want to have any, the Jesuits are, because they're a secret society put in for that certain goal to make Catholicism the new Babylon and the universal religion. But they don't want to be held up by the bloodlines and all the rivalries and everything else that's going on that's not getting there quickly.
Yeah.
That means they're doing intrigue with the royal bloodlines, like assassinations.
Yeah, I thought so. Last quadrillion. Oh, what comes after that? Wow, come on, Vast, don't cheat. Look, tell us what's after quadrillion. I couldn't even imagine what it's called.
Right? And things like that. So they get taken down. But what happens is in the early 1800s, you start to have the further extension of this is you have, like the French kings, for example, they are taking a...
Vast, is that $1 trillion?
Oh,
hey, Phil, good to see you, mate.
and exiling them in France. And so this goes on for a couple of popes, and then you have one of the popes who says, enough of this, we need our own protection, we're going to reinstitute the Jesuits. And of course, they haven't been completely eliminated because in parts of Prussia and Eastern Europe, they still exist. It was only the Western bloodlines, which is, again, to understand the divide. And obviously, the Puyanans were not playing ball with the Western bloodlines, right? So then they created social masonry in the 1800s as well to start bringing them down early in the 20th century. So now you have the rise of Mary apparitions in conjunction with the rise and the return of the Jesuits. And even though they had all of their power taken away, by the late 1800s, they have all of it reinstated. So they're back. And now we have a Jesuit pope in place. You probably won't see any other type of pope, it's my speculation, other than a Jesuit pope, so that they can make sure.
Gee, Phil, you look confident now. Good on you.
Sure, they're going to make Rome into the center for the Babylon religion. So, but the Catholic Church will be sort of a branch of that, because Vaticanus Hill is outside the Seven Hills. And so look for more of these Mary apparitions, just as you have prophets that have been initiated by them at Medjugorje, I suspect elsewhere as well, who will have apocalyptic prophecy. So the false prophets will come before Babylon, convert to the universal religion, or be destroyed from the face of the earth, because they're trying to create the new Babel, the new Babylon. Babylon, as we understand that word in the New Testament, is rooted in the Hebrew word Babel, where Nimrod had complete sway with the universal religion, Enochian mysticism from before the flood. And these are all the religions that come out of Babel, as the polytheist religions that we understand as the daughters of Babylon. But yet we'll have the real religion ruling all of them, because you have the mother of Babylon riding the 10 kings and the beast empires as part of the hierarchical order. But that is coming back. That imagery is all exacting for a particular reason. Again, if you dig into the allegories in the Old Testament, they help define allegories for end time prophecy. So the Jesuits are back, and they may go rogue again. In fact, Antichrist will destroy Babylon for the 10 kings who grow jealous of them. Sounds very similar to what happened the first time. And we get the details of that in Revelation 17, 14, and 18. So, and in the Old Testament as well. So the Jesuits are going to be instrumental, likely, in either controlling or putting Catholicism in place to bring about the Babylon religion. And so look for more Mary apparitions around the world, but as a Queen of Heaven and adapted for all the other religions. So you get visions that are, I'm starting to hear visions of Hathor coming out around the world. She was a
Catholics believe that if you're not Catholic, you don't get into heaven. And they're dead fast on that. They really do think that, guys. I've been arguing with them for weeks. And some of their beliefs, it's such blasphemy.
Queen of Heaven. So you might look at all the different names for Queen of Heaven titles for apparitions for different cultures that will be talking about the same types of prophecies all around the world. That's going to bring about this universal religion. And you have this Mary apparition within the church already. Mary is highly regarded within Protestantism, and Mary is highly regarded in Islam. And if you de-deify Jesus, you have the ability in a number of different ways to start seeing how through catastrophes and apocalyptic prophecies that they can weave the ancient Enochian mysticism back into play for the end time.
Wow. That's scary, actually. And I never heard of that, the prophecy of...
Vast. I think they're going to create Christianity and Islam. They're going to mix them together. And it's going to be the Catholics on the Christian side. I think they're going to team up with the Muslims and come after a lot of this. I've been talking to the Catholics, and they're really very much like that still.
Who did you call it? Not Mary, but the other lady?
Hathor.
Hathor.
Yeah.
I never heard of that.
Yeah. Well, and Mary's compared to Isis by the Gnostics. So they're already using that. But, get used to Ashtaroth, Ashtart, Inanna, Lilith, and there's so many different names for the queens of heaven that, but it's designed to reach into the vernacular sort of nature and language and culture of all the ones so that they have a piece of the universal religion as that comes together, because it's going to have many sects to it.
Wow. Now, does Trump have some kind of bloodline that goes back to some, I don't know, one of those hierarchies?
I haven't done a lot of research on him, but if he does, it would be very low-level bloodlines. It would require intermarriage. He might be more akin to, as an analogy, a possibility where you have strong men as part of those 10 kings, right?
I see.
But no, he's not strong on that. And even if he did have some, he's been ostracized from the Western bloodline.
I think so.
He has a different vision than the Western European bloodlines. He has similar vision, not necessarily in detail, but in overview as Putin does or Xi does.
It's like built for Aussie gardens. Discover the difference. At Hammond Care, we've been caring for people for more than 90 years. So if you need home care...
And he's not necessarily against, when I'd say President Trump is not necessarily against the New World Order. He just wants the U.S. to have a larger...
No, Vast, they claim they are the universal church. and they base that on St. Antioch and somewhere in the 200s, and somewhere during what he read through scripture, he said Catholics, and he basically spelled a weird way of spelling Catholics. They come along 200 years later and say they're connected way back to Peter. But Ignatius didn't mean that. That's what I think. They come along 200 years after Ignatius. They seen what he said, so they jumped in and hijacked it, just like they did Mary. So they can't prove Catholics were around before Constantine. I've done my research.
Not the lesser role that
See, my voice is weak lately.
puppets like Biden and Harris and all of the left-wing progressive social masonry parties are trying to reduce the standard of living and power of the U.S. in readiness for these 10 kings, because they looked at, you can't have a dominant power like the U.S. to have this union. We needed the U.S. to get us to where we are, but now we need to reel them in. And so
They claim they go back to Peter, because when Jesus said, "You are the rock," they're claiming it from that. Yet 64 years later, Nero's persecuting Christians. He's not persecuting Catholics. And the Christians back then, before the Catholics showed up, they were known as the Way. That's what they were known as. And that's what the Catholics come in and hijacked.
will they be heading one of the 10 groups? Perhaps.
And the Catholics weren't mentioned in Nero 64 when he persecuted the Christians, but they reckon that means them.
With a strong man, or they'll be re-emerged with the bloodlines of England in a probably united kingdom. And that language of United Kingdom is the language of the Templars for the world. Wow. So when King James, the mighty King James, had a language created, probably sponsored by him, but maybe done.
The Catholics hate King James, and they really hate Martin Luther.
In parallel, they wanted to create a new language for the new Babel, for the new Atlantis, which was the English language, and the mighty Gabor James, I'm adding on to that because that's how you would translate mighty out of Hebrew as Gabor or Gaborim, a royale. He created a commonwealth that he also looked at himself as a unicorn king, right? And has the unicorns in his coat of arms, and he is the unicorn, and unicorn is put into the English Bible with that Baconian English that was done to probably use as a reference to him or his bloodlines as one of the rivals for. And
okay, Phil, I might be wrong here, but I thought the Noahide laws was about Jesus, and if you worship Jesus, it's classed as an idol. So that's how I understand it.
End time Antichrist, and there's a lot of speculation out there now that King Charles III is going to be the Antichrist. Maybe, but maybe a little too old too. So
I haven't read the Noahide laws. I haven't read them, no.
But definitely that bloodline is a rival, and a leading rival for Antichrist. But we won't know until he's totally revealed at the midpoint of the last 7 years. And we're going to see multiple Antichrists. And one of them is going to be so convincing, he's going to convince the world he's the true Messiah. So we have to stick, as a Christian, we need to stick with Scripture, not to get lost into all the noise that happened.
Think of it, guys. There's no time left for it. It's really all happening now. So he's going to put these people in place. And I think Trump's the first one put in place. I think he's one of the 10 kings
in the world. And don't let short-term things affect
Sorry, Phil, we agree to disagree there, mate.
The longer view that you've been given.
True. I hear a lot of people say that God speaks to them. After Pentecost 33 CE, I thought that was probably the last time that God spoke to you, like, I don't know, through their head or something. How does God speak to us today? Is it just through scripture or is there more?
Yeah, so it's a really good question. So, the first thing I would have people do is if they think that God is speaking to you, then you need to test the spirit. Are you from God? Are you God? And they will not tell you that they are God.
Okay,
if they're not, 'cause
Phil,
they'd be
I completely disagree with that. They're the Ten Commandments. I completely disagree with that.
they'd be into the pit prison as part of the terrible ones. So you need to test the spirits. And if they're not from God, and if they don't say,
If the Noahide laws were legit, God would have put it in the Bible. It's as simple as that.
say that Jesus is, and test them the second way is they don't say Jesus is the Son of God. Isn't the word?
And that's calling God a liar, saying there's only 7 commandments. That's saying the Old Testament's lying, Phil.
Of God came, was crucified and resurrected, then you've got a demon spirit that you're dealing with. So first thing is test that spirit. The second thing is that we get the Holy Spirit that is sent to us after Jesus leaves.
Amen.
That Holy Spirit is still with us. So we could get, and we do get, prophecy and gifts supplied by the Holy Spirit after Jesus left. But if it's going to be the Spirit of God, again, the question will let you know whether you're on the right track. But you're not dealing with God. You're dealing with one of the tripart natures to God, the Spirit of God. And so
I've read the Jesuit oath, and you got to bet your bottom dollar the Jesuits are going to be involved in this Noahide law thing. So just on what the Noahide, I lost it.
if they're saying they're dealing with God, that's probably
Jesuits, sorry, I lost track of thought then.
not likely. And that would be El Elyon, the God Most High, or Elohim in the superlative and uppercase, as he can be referred to. So again, to understand sometimes what God is, you got to take it back to Hebrew. And if it's the word of God, it would be Jehovah of the Elohim, who you would be dealing with. So you should know who you're dealing with. You're not dealing with all three, usually. And it's most unlikely because the Holy Spirit was sent to do this. So I am more open to people saying the Spirit led me to this, but then I still want them. I want to test them. I want to know whether or not if they are changing Scripture in any way, because that's a clear red flag. And if they're saying they are a prophet, now it doesn't mean God can't make a prophet at any point in time, but clearly in Daniel 9, we're told that after the fall of Jerusalem, after that generation, all prophecy and vision stopped until the end time. And we will see prophecy return to Judea and to Israel in the last 3.5 years, as Joel talks about in the New Testament. And we will see the 144,000, and we will see the 2 witnesses, but we do not get scripture that says we'll have other prophets. And the typical thing that polytheists like to do is they like to add on to scripture or change scripture. And we have some Christian associated religions that do that, and that they say that they can change the Bible if they want to change it.
Dave, doesn't Jesus hate traditions, man's traditions? Didn't he have a go at them about their traditions? Like if it was something like you do your traditions when you're not even helping anyone.
They can add anything on to you can't. You can't. And those are tests. So I hope people are receiving the Holy Spirit. But if they say they're a prophet, my red flags are up, left, right, and center. The Holy Spirit could give us a prophecy if we wanted. Obviously, did with the apostle.
Okay, Vas, what do you do for the Sabbath that you don't do on every other day? What is it you're supposed to do with the Sabbath? Because we're already resting. We don't work hard.
And disciples. Typically, we get other gifts. So discernment might be a good one.
I got discernment, guys, with my OSD code.
Speaking in tongues, but if they're speaking in tongues, there has to be a translator. Otherwise, it's a demon spirit. You need to tell it to go. And I run across people who say that they speak to God all the time. We all do. We all pray to God. We all feel there's an interaction there. There's a difference between being spoken to and having him speak through you that the prophets had as a relationship. That is distinct. And one ought to be careful of being a false prophet. You should be very, very careful.
Phil, I'm going to play Vars's AI Atlas one that goes for half an hour. Then I'll switch to yours and then I'll hang up, guys. I'll go there now, actually. What are the 7 Noahide laws? This is from Phil, guys.
These principles are known as the 7 Noahide laws, which are derived from ancient texts and are considered fundamental ethical guidelines for humanity. The origin of these laws can be traced back to the story of Noah in the Hebrew Bible, specifically after the Great Flood. According to tradition, these laws were given to Noah and his descendants as a moral framework for living in harmony. The 7 Noahide laws.
Okay, straight off the bat, we know it's not scriptural. So straight off the bat, these Noahide laws are crooked already. Wow.
Are as follows. 1. Prohibition of idolatry. This law emphasizes the importance of worshiping only one God and avoiding the worship of idols or false gods.
And they class Jesus as an idol.
Prohibition of murder. This principle underscores the sanctity of human life, prohibiting acts of murder and encouraging respect for all individuals. 1. Prohibition of theft. This law establishes the importance of respecting others' property and prohibits stealing in any form. 1. Prohibition of sexual immorality. This guideline promotes family values and sexual ethics, prohibiting acts considered immoral or inappropriate. 1. Prohibition of blasphemy. This law stresses the importance of respecting the name of God and prohibits speaking disrespectfully about the divine. 1. Prohibition of eating.
So they can lock you up for thinking. Come on, Moon. Come on, Moon, I'll get your coffee stopped.
This principle advocates for humane treatment of animals and prohibits cruelty in the consumption of food. 1. Establishment of courts of justice. This law encourages societies to create systems of justice to uphold these principles and ensure fairness and order. These laws are seen as a universal moral code that can guide individuals and societies toward ethical living.
Humane treatment of animals. You know that's going to get down to you no longer can eat meat. You have to eat vegetables.
They serve as a foundation for justice and ethical behavior, promoting peace and cooperation among all people.
Only one of them was compatible with the Old Testament. The rest had nothing to do with the Old Testament. I don't think they've got anything to do with them. Okay, here's Vars's one on Atlas.
Australian grown vegetables, now in a resealable pack. An eye for good, bird's eye.
Back to another live stream. Today's Thursday, December the 4th, one day away from Friday again. We were just talking about this on Monday, and yes, seems like it was just yesterday, but no, tomorrow is Friday again. In this video, we're going to talk about the latest and the greatest information I could find about Comet Atlas. I've been talking about Comet Atlas for a couple of days, and today we're going to discuss Comet Atlas. What's going on, guys? Having coffee with common sense. You must get notified every time. That's cool. I'm glad somebody is. What's up, Ragdoll, Jason, SR, Town of New Mexico. Good to see everybody here, Justin. We're going to come back and take a look at Comet Atlas, what it's doing, where it's going here in a minute. Okay, here's where it's at. I'll show you guys right now. We're over here at the JPL. This is the sky map today, 12/4/2025. Atlas just exited the orbit of Mars. So we all know that it's going through the solar system like a jet would fly, flying in on the ecliptic
Okay, it's only 4 hours old, guys. Yeah.
plane, which is in itself very bizarre. And the fact that it went by 3 planets, had perihelion behind the sun, just a whole plethora of unusual things makes this thing highly mysterious.
So I reckon they got a hide springing the no hide laws on us. Who do they think they are? They're not even Christian.
Coming up on a gas giant, and we're going to talk about that here in just a minute. Speaking of gas giants, I want to give you guys an update on the planetary alignment situation. Yes, we are in an unusual position with regard to planet Earth. This happens every once in a while when the big squeeze is on, is what I call it, when the Earth is in between, obviously, the sun, the main character of all this stuff up here in space. But sometimes when the gas giants and other planets line up, and we have what I call conductors and transistors, and you look at the cosmos as a circuit board, it kind of makes more sense. So that's what we're looking at right now. At least that's how I look at it. And energy's on the move. And Earth is in a prime position to receive a lot of that energy. And today, believe it or not, here's the position of the planets literally right now as I do this video, at least with regard to Jupiter, Earth, obviously the main character, Sun, and then Mars on the backside. So that's what we've got going on. But today, something unusual happened. And I know you guys, more than likely, because you're wide awake and on the ball, make sure you hit that like button, guys. Oh, my goodness. Yeah, this is a screen grab that I took. I'm like, wait a minute, did they put it back on here? Today at 16:06 Universal Time, it was mid-morning out here in Arizona. There was a 5.9 earthquake, a very shallow 5.9 earthquake. In fact, it was about, 4 miles deep, 8 kilometers, right here near Carson City, Nevada.
You just posted that, Di, about half an hour ago.
Just east of Lake Tahoe. I mean, talk about an unusual place for an earthquake. Well, that's one of the side effects of these rare planetary alignments and high solar activity like we're seeing right now. And not to mention, we're entering full moon phase. In fact, it's probably already full moon. So all of these things factored in do have an influence on earthquakes. And I was like, what? A 5.9 in western Nevada near Carson City? Well, lo and behold, about 30 minutes later, the earthquake was taken off the map. And I went to the USGS seismographs because I wanted to see the seismographs for myself, at least in the area of Nevada, maybe Utah and Wyoming. They were offline. None of them were online. They may still be offline for all I know. So here's a look at the earthquake map right now. And as you guys can see, no 5.5 or 5.9 near Lake Tahoe or Carson City. They said it was
Phil, we love you, mate. You're part of the family. Look, we all disagree with each other sometimes, so don't. Yeah, no one's trying to insult you or anything. We're just sharing ideas, and I happen to think you're wrong on that one. And we can say that without worrying about getting into big arguments, because we're a bit more older in the head than that.
Some sort of a glitch. Okay. 5.9 is a pretty big glitch, Mr. Graham01, who's a Star family member. I don't think I've ever seen that. Yes, I've seen earthquakes come on here.
Okay, the bigger question is, why are they hiding this earthquake?
Doubles, a tandem. Let's say, for instance, there was a 6.5 somewhere, just anywhere. Let's say down here in Tonga, there was a 6.5. Okay. Well, sometimes the map would show a double 6.5, one right after the other, maybe 10 seconds later, and maybe even at a different depth. Well, one of them later they would take off the map as it was some sort of a, they call it a shake detector, and the shake detector sensor, whatever, was detecting two when in reality there was one. Well, from what I'm being told, there was some sort of a shake detector anomaly up here near Carson City this morning that was suggesting there was a 5.9 earthquake. I mean, that's nearly a 6.0. That's a lot of energy, man. To be a glitch? But that's what's going on. That was a glitch. But that doesn't necessarily mean that we won't see a even larger possible earthquake here in the coming days, just simply because of the planetary position, the heightened solar activity. In case you guys haven't heard, we've got a new family member up here with regard to sunspots. Sunspot 4300 right there. As soon as it joined the big family here of very large sunspots turning towards the Earth, it tore off an M6 class solar flare. From what I understand, there is an Earth-directed component. Honestly, I haven't seen it yet on the last go. If there is a component, I think it's going to be, at the very best, maybe a glancing blow. In fact, let's just look. It should be updated by now. Let's go to the website, incoming storms, the Parker spiral. Here we go. I'm not seeing anything any different. This is the sun. This is the Earth. There's the solar flare from the second with the CME, high-speed CME, and I'm not seeing a new CME. So sometimes solar flares do not produce CMEs. All solar flares are not created equal. And this is one of those solar flares that the M6, which was right there, just under the X category. We'll probably see some X's here in the coming days, but not yet. I'm very, very surprised. The coronal hole coming over here, they were talking about it over here at spaceweather.com, strong solar flare and a CME, but the CME looks like it may miss the Earth. Looking at the coronal hole, we've been talking about this for the last 5 days. When the coronal hole was over here, it did face the Earth, as obviously we anticipated because it was big, and it was an equatorial coronal hole. And yes, it did produce a geomagnetic storm, albeit small. It was a very brief G3. I mean, G1s we don't even hardly really talk about, but they happen. A G1 can happen when the BZ tilts south, and right now I don't know whether the BZ's north or south. Let's just go look over here at spaceweather.com. The BZ right now is north. That means the shields are closed. So there's really not too much going on, but that could change at any time because the Earth-facing side of the sun, once again, is absolutely loaded with sunspots and active regions. And the ones that are more active right now have been the smaller ones, 4295 and 4300. 4295 producing the X-class solar flare, 4300 producing the M6 that we just saw earlier, actually late last night at 0250 Zulu Universal Time. So we're still waiting. More than likely, they're primed and getting ready, and we'll see probably one after another. This is what the active region that we're looking at in the sunspots have been doing over here on the backside of the sun. This is from the 29th through the 4th, but the regions have been hyperactive for several days. And I think right now what they're doing is just basically taking a break, like Mount Kilauea taking a break. It's been launching tall fountains of lava for several days off and on. The last 10 days, the last 3 days, it's just been up here just kind of smoldering, smoke drifting off into the distance. So for the time being, Mount Kilauea is rather quiet, but volcanoes also react to sunstorms, geomagnetic storms, planetary alignments, which we are definitely in a planetary alignment right now as I do this video, and will be for at least the next 10 days. 3i Atlas update. Here we go, guys. What I want to talk about are two things with regard to Comet Atlas, the mysterious ancient time traveler. Two things: the mysterious interstellar visitor. Where'd it go? Right here. Let's close it out. The mysterious interstellar visitor, 3i Atlas, will soon come in close encounter with planet Jupiter. That's where it's headed, right here. That's it.
It looks like the Indians blew Katrina.
Next rendezvous point.
They've got a meteor that ends the Earth.
You couldn't have mapped this out better with a pencil and paper and a computer. Right by Mars, or actually Venus, then Mars, or Mars, Venus, behind the sun, then Jupiter. Staying away from the Earth for the most part. It's going to have its close approach to the Earth on December 19th. So coming up here in about 2 weeks. But there's something else that's been going on in mysterious interstellar. The mysterious interstellar object, 3i Atlas, appears to be pulsating in a heartbeat pattern. We're going to talk about that here in a minute too. But first, its encounter with Jupiter. Mainly, what could happen? It's going to be affected by Jupiter as its close approach to Jupiter's in March, coming up in a couple of months, towards the end of March. But it's going to alter its path maybe just a little bit. Some people are speculating, and again, this is just highly speculatory, but some pretty big names. Who was it I was reading over here? Avi Loeb and Michio Kaku. These guys are well known. Michio Kaku. They are, again, this is just highly speculation, but they believe that once it nears Jupiter, it can be influenced by Jupiter's gravity, and it totally will, guaranteed, and causing it to become temporary captive in Jupiter's orbit. I don't know that that's going to happen. It's moving very fast, but you never know. Stranger things have happened. But more than the gravitational force, it's likely to be influenced by outgassing and radiation pressure. From an entirely new perspective, Harvard scientist Avi Loeb suspects that 3i Atlas is not even a natural cosmic object. They think that this thing is going to possibly land on Jupiter, release probes as it thrusts down into position that are going to be on Jupiter there forever. Again, that is just speculation. I don't think anybody knows for sure what it's going to do, but one thing for sure, it's going to get close enough to Jupiter that, it will be influenced by the orbit of Jupiter. And something else that's going on is its personality. Its personality has been strange from day one, and this thing, it hasn't changed. It's still acting very mysteriously, and here we go. Let me show you guys what's up. The pulsating light of this thing, for whatever reason, it pulsates every 16 hours. They're describing it as a heartbeat pattern, and the heartbeat once.
See, that's accepted now that this AI has got an inside glow to it. So this is widely accepted now. What they were saying 2 weeks ago is actually happening. Geez, I wonder if we're going to get a Chronicles of Riddick moment here.
Again, is on a 16 hour and 16-minute cycle. The mysterious interstellar object, 3i Atlas, is just weeks away from reaching its close approach to the Earth. That's December the 19th. As Harvard astronomer Avi Loeb points out in a new blog post, they'll be building on intriguing and existing observations from ground telescopes. And here's a look at the comet right here. Check it out. Look at that. Still no tail. This thing has not had a tail since day one. It's been behind the sun at its close approach to the sun, and that's almost always, every time when a comet develops any type of a massive tail, it's during its close approach to the sun. This one did not do that. But anyway, they're talking about the personality of the light. They say that a team of researchers in Europe and Africa found signs that it's radiating a heartbeat pulse of light that repeats every 16 hours and 16 minutes. While that may sound like an intriguing new fold in Loeb's long-standing efforts to support the theory that the object could...
Okay, I suspect these UFOs or whatever they are, I think they're living organisms. Do you remember when they had the drone hassles around February this year, and a drone got stuck in the tree, and there was something inside it moving, and you could see it? I reckon UFOs are actually the shell, like a snail shell, of whatever's inside. I think that's very similar.
Be an extraterrestrial spacecraft visiting the solar system. There's likely a much more mundane explanation that it's spinning, pulsing us with light and interstellar, like an interstellar lighthouse, or like a pulsar. I saw a pulsar one time up in the nighttime sky. I believe it was a pulsar. It was in the constellation of Hydra, and it would pulse every 3 minutes and 30 seconds. When Earth was in the right position. And that was in March of 2012, 2013, 2014, 2015. I haven't seen it since, but it's kind of behaving like that. And more than likely it is because it's tumbling and it's reflecting light, and it's on like basically a 16-hour orbit. So for whatever reasons, during that 16th hour, there's something shiny that's reflecting light. So it's brighter on one side than it is the other. So is that brightness from something that's made of intelligent origin? Or is it just got half of it's a bright icy body and the other half isn't? Or is it just some sort of a shiny metallic material that we've never seen before because there's a complete absence of a tail? Like right here, there's no evidence of a tail or any type of outgassing really. Like a normal comet. There's just nothing normal about this thing at all. This thing's been moving at 130,000 miles per hour. He goes on to say if it is really spinning, then 3I Atlas is anti-tail, which scientists suspect is the result of a pocket of material less affected by the sun's radiation pressure. Could be causing the stream of particles to flood to its coma, a fuzzy atmosphere of ice and dust surrounding its nucleus. But anyway, this thing has never, since day one, behaved like a comet. And honestly, guys, I don't think it ever will, because it's pulling away from the sun right now. And here it is when it was first discovered right here, probably a month into this thing. See it right there? You see it's kind of tumbling there.
It's not tumbling, it's morphing. UFOs, the movie Transformer is based on that. It's not tumbling, it's morphing.
Get tough on allergies. All day, all night, all year. Allertine. Available at your pharmacy.
Doing something. That was one of the more interesting views from Michael Yeager. If it wasn't for him, humanity wouldn't even have these types of looks of this comet. All NASA showed us was a little speck, a speck of dust. So thankfully, there's highly skilled people like Michael Yeager that can reach up there and show us things. He is very, very talented. But there it is right there, whatever it may be. Never has looked like a comet, doesn't look like a comet now, and I don't think it ever will. But anyway, they have discovered through observations that it does have a mysterious heartbeat-like pattern.
Phil, did you just say we've got no salvation?
That for whatever reasons, every 16 hours, it pulses a beam of light, just adds to the mystery. Back to the geomagnetic storm. Yes, there was a G3 geomagnetic storm. We had auroras sent in. Here's a quick video from Iceland. I've got Iris up in Iceland that's keeping track of the skies for us above Iceland, and this is what she saw last night during the overnight hours. I think it was just after midnight, 12:04, which is 12:04 today. Over here in the States, I think it's already approaching midnight over there in Iceland.
Oh, I get it, Phil, because you probably wouldn't know salvation. I thought you were saying we would know salvation. They meant salvation. I'll never see salvation. Sorry, mate, I misread that. I thought, why would Phil say something like that? But yeah, I got it wrong, mate.
Right now, they may be having auroras again, but that's what the sky looked like. Thank you, Iris, so much. Really appreciate seeing the skies above Iceland. Have never been to Iceland. Looks like an absolutely fantastic, beautiful place. Thanks for sharing. I want to show you guys a green sky that is not aurora. Are you ready for this? Here we go. This video right here, I'm going to share with you guys the original video right here by Tanya Wendell. This is out of Michigan. Check this out. Let me turn down the volume. Okay, here she is. She looked up. Now she's going to point this camera in different directions just to show that there's no other green anywhere else. Watch, she goes over to the left. 8 p.m.
What's she looking at?
It was the first week of November, and we were not having a geomagnetic storm. Look at her go to the left. No green, no purple, nothing over there. But for some reason, above her community, there was a bright green light in the sky. She still...
What could possibly cause that?
Oh, to this day has no idea what that was. She shared a couple of videos with me, and I wanted to pass those along to you guys. That came out of Michigan, I don't know, a few weeks back, but it was not, again, aurora, and that was not during a geomagnetic storm. What a bizarre video. Green light. Here's a recent view of Atlas out of Italy, November 28th by Graziano Ventre. Italy, November 28th.
It's changed colors 4 times, I think.
28th. Let's zoom in. Look for that tail. Where's the tail? No tail. These are streaks of light. These are background stars because this is a long exposure, multi-stacked base image is what it is. This image is probably, it took 25 minutes to make this one image. And it's a series of images stacked together, keeping the comet the main focal point. But again, no tail. And this image right here is a week old. Where's the tail? There isn't one. So it's still a mystery. It looks pretty bright right there. Don't know, but it's pulsing now for whatever reasons every 16 hours, adding to the mystery. What else do I have for you guys? We got the full moon tonight. Don't forget the full moon. If it's not cloudy in your location, by all means, step outside and check out the full moon, super moon. Guys, this has been going on now for over a year. I know some of you think this is just a ballast, maybe a light bulb issue, but I've seen over 2,275 examples now. This video here is out of Austin, Texas. Got a light, 2 lights underneath the canopy, and then the light on the building itself was malfunctioning. Franklin, New Jersey, Chris, lights in the front of the building, malfunctioning. He'd never seen it do that before. That's why he stopped and took the video. I'm going to go through this quick because I know a lot of you are not interested in this. But, guys, it's part of a bigger picture. Wilmington, Delaware, Mike M, 1128. Got a light back there in the back. And you know these are on a different circuit. See the bulb back there in the back, the light pole? And then the sign in front of the building, malfunctioning. And they're totally unrelated, but they sensed something. Fairfax, Virginia, Bruce came up on a series of lights behind the building, malfunctioning. Example number 5. AJ out of Sacramento, California, light in his entryway, malfunctioning, unlike anything he'd ever seen it do. It normally is either on or off.
When I was in the new age, I'd turn a lamp on and a light bulb would blow. It happened way more often than not.
Not disco dancing like it is in this video right here, but I still get examples not every day, but almost every day, at least multiple times a week. I want to take you guys up to Mount Rainier real quick because it's responding to something. The west flank vibrating away again. This doesn't necessarily mean it's going to erupt. I don't know what it means. It could mean a variety of different things. But whatever it is, it's doing it again. This is today. Let's go back to yesterday. I think it started yesterday. Yeah, it started last night. Look at that. So maybe it's sensing the planetary alignment. I know volcanoes do. I've connected that dot a long time ago, guys. I wouldn't even bring it up if I hadn't connected the dot at some point in time in my adult life, and I have. So I don't know if this is reacting to the energy from the planetary alignment, maybe the full moon. Could be a combination of things. But anyway, the western flank of Mount Rainier is, for whatever reasons, vibrating again. And there you have it. And there are other volcanoes up there doing the same thing. Some like Mount Hood up near Canada, or up in Washington. But there's other ones doing this, not just Mount Rainier. So quick update on that. It was quiet there for a couple of days, and now it's right back at it, doing it again. So very, very interesting. Like the earthquake, the absence of an earthquake this morning, that was a very bizarre sequence of events. 5.9 popped up mysteriously near Carson City out of nowhere, and the seismographs were offline, and now the entire earthquake is as if it never even existed. And apparently it never did. I'm just curious, is anybody in here that lives near Lake Tahoe or Carson City? Do you guys feel anything up there? Mount St. Helens. I checked on Mount St. Helens and I didn't see anything up there, Michael. Good question. I did check on Mount St. Helens. Anybody up there near the Lake Tahoe, Carson City? I'm just curious because like I said, I've seen tandem earthquakes and then one, be taken off. And that was following like a legitimate 6.5, whatever, 6.8, usually a big quake. And this one was big for Nevada just to disappear like that. All right, I was just curious. I was just looking at the comments, guys. So, all right, well, I don't think anybody in here is from Carson City or Lake Tahoe. I thought I'd take a chance. Happy birthday, Jenny. All right, yay. Mr. Graham in the house, Star family member.
Okay, guys, I'll finish off with JW. Apart from Diane, he's our volcano and earthquake guy.
You have earthquakes being deleted. And a lot of you are asking what is happening on the West Coast right now. And we're here to get deeper into that, showing you after this 5.9 was announced. Let's look at the official side of the story, and then let's get into everything else eyewitnesses are saying and some other things that are occurring.
So if you have the My Shake app, you may have gotten an alert just around the 8 o'clock hour, specifically around 8:06, that there was an earthquake that occurred just outside of the town of Dayton in Nevada. And for some folks...
Okay, did they hide this volcano earthquake news from the locals to keep them in town so they can sit there when the big earthquake hits? That sounds like the plan. Keep them all in town. Because to take that down, there must be something bad coming.
Some folks, even in foothills around the region, reported that there was potentially some shaking. Now, what happened in this event is, unfortunately, with this trigger sensors that are happening and all the areas where we have most of the fault lines, sometimes a sensor can go off. And until it's reviewed by a seismologist with the USGS, sometimes that information can be erroneous. And in this situation, unfortunately, after a seismologist reviewed this event, they determined that.
So yeah, people woke up and they had this happen. We also have.
Okay, Dave, God bless, mate.
These king tides, showing up at pretty much around the same timeline, where we're going to get into that, because as the king tides are showing up, we have this anomalous energy coming, this magnetic energy, and Washington is unveiling this new tsunami strategy plan. And that's because they don't really have the warnings they used to have. So we're going to be looking down in the chat here and seeing what you're saying in local areas across Washington, across California, across Oregon, across all these areas and zones, and even up to Alaska.
If I lived in Miami or Florida, I'd leave Florida because it's at sea level. Wouldn't take much to flood the whole lot of it.
And Canada, that is having these situations happen. Now, let's investigate the situation here. So, what are people saying about this event? And when I looked into it, there is some interesting things that people are saying. But for one, this lady gives us really insight about, okay, if this really happened, I don't think she would be saying this.
I just got alert. I slept through this somehow.
So that right there tells me you're not sleeping through no 5.9. You're gonna get your butt up because it's gonna be rattling and shaking. So you ain't gonna be having your butt sleep during that time. But moving further into here's December 4th today, we can look at the seismic graph. There is no vibration, there is no up and down movement on here. So there supposedly wasn't anything seismically actually occurring at this time. The question people have is, okay, was there something underground happening? And I did a lot of research. I looked into that, and I didn't see anything happening underground. But how will we know 100% there's not anything happening underground? But what makes this a little more strange, and we'll get into it, is this is not the only location in the last few days that's had seismic-like events. So this was a deleted quake. Officially, that's what's come out. But there's been other areas that has not been deleted, and we'll be getting into that here to show you in just a second. But this is also a repeated cycle in history, which is pretty interesting as well. And that's why you need to listen to what this woman says here next.
Boss, when this is over, I'll play that one. It only goes for 2 minutes.
A short while ago, USGS issued an alert for a 5.9 magnitude earthquake in Dayton, Nevada. Dayton is not far from Reno and Carson City. It turns out it was a false alarm, but it caught my attention, so I had to dive into the birth chart for Dayton. Dayton was born in late 1861. In 1861, that is when Neptune had dipped into Aries, and then it went back into Pisces. It was doing exactly what it's doing right now, and it only does it every 165 years. All right, why is that important? Well, right now, this is all happening under a super full moon in Gemini, and Dayton was born with Uranus in Gemini at the exact point that the full moon is going to hit its peak. All right, additionally, this reminds me that history repeats itself. It absolutely does, and we will soon see more evidence of that. And with regards to what happened in the 1860s, things like the Great California Flood, the Gold Rush, the Civil War.
So the moon alignment with this right now is very much in alignment with the past history effects. And the question is, are we about to enter something based off of this situation? Because right now you can see tonight the moon is closer to Earth than any other time. And like we said, the king tides are being super dramatic along San Francisco Bay Area shoreline because of this magnetic energy. At the same time, we got the solar storm energy coming in as well. Take a look at these waves, though, and pretty much how big they were getting. Okay, so if you were in the area, I want you to let me know something, because this was one of the things that was a strange event that wasn't talked about. And we'll get into the magnetic energy here in just a second. So sure, this thing was deleted today. Sure, yeah, that happened. But a few days ago, before this happened, you can take a look on screen, December 3rd, Utah had a possible earthquake shaking event happen. And there was never any reports afterwards by USGS about this. The possible seismic-like event was reported across St. George, Utah, USA on December 2nd at first, and then it went into the 3rd because it was a little bit late as the data came in to be reported. So what is happening with all this shaking? And this is not even popping up on USGS radar. So if you're in Utah, let us know what you felt. And I've already confirmed that this 5.9 didn't happen. But if there is some anomalous that we need to know, if you're in that area, you were in Reno, Nevada, you were in Dayton, Dayton area of Nevada, which is where this happened, let us know because we'll be looking through the chat section to find out exactly what you're seeing. Now, if we look at this same area, but kind of like a little bit further left. So California was alerted as well. They got an alert saying like, why are we getting alerts? This was in Nevada, was it? Yeah, Nevada. There we go. Nevada can't even say that. All right, let's go right here. Mysterious loud booms. Okay, this was talked about a little bit further back, right? And the lady reported something that was interesting because people say, hey, was it underground? What are they doing there? Is there something happening there? The question. Because when she described this of what was happening in the area she's describing, we got to put it up on a map. We got to show you because once you hear what she says, you need to know exactly where it's at. All right. So this is where it's reported at. Residents in the area of Killeen, Oak Hills, Baldy, Mesa, Daily Press, and this was a while back. Loud boom shook property, scared horses, and made dogs howl. So check it out, though. It's just not any report. High Desert residents of over 60 years, Susan Moore, said she's familiar with the sound of fireworks, thunder, gunshots, sonic booms. These loud booms weren't any of those things, Moore told the Daily Press. It felt like sound waves were penetrating the air and ground. Just weird. Miguel Sanchez, who lives near Highway 395, said that the loud booms went off every couple of hours and scared his wife, children, and dogs. I mean, what does that sound like to y'all? What does it sound like? Because this is the situations that right now.
Okay, Phil, apart from the Pharisee and the Sadducees, I never knew there was other sects. Not sex, sex, CTS. I should have to clear that up. Yeah, I didn't know that, Phil.
Now we have to question why these events are taking place. Like, was there some activity occurring underground? That's a big question here. Again, this was the area on map specifically where they were at in California when they were hearing this. So, same week, all this comes out, everybody. Same exact week, same day, as a matter of fact. We have them in Washington now saying, oh, we're now going to unveil a new tsunami strategy plan in anticipation of the big one. This is December 4th, 2025. So this is just coming out right now. And why is that? That's because we told you about how they're going to shut off the sirens and stuff like that, the tsunami sirens. So apparently now Washington, let's show you where they're saying, in Oregon, they're saying, well,
least amount of warnings. I reckon they're going to flood this joint and sue them. Take all the land.
Wait a minute. In Oregon, we might just go ahead and still use those warnings. Yeah. So Oregon is saying, even though the tsunami warnings was continuing, this was despite the federal cuts, they would continue theirs. Washington did not say that, however. They said
that's like those apartments that went up in Hong Kong last week. They were told to stay indoors, and that's the same one that happened at London. They were told to stay indoors as well.
There's tsunami.
They want them killed so they can take over the land.
The warnings for Washington coast may be delayed. That's why you here in the chat are important to let us know what are you hearing, what are you seeing. Because people were talking about how these waves are getting king tides, and it's because the moon is coming in, and we do see the waves start to come up during that time. But if you see something outside of what I'm saying, this chat right here is going to be very important. You look at the comments, you listen to people here because they've alerted us of some very, very life-saving beings because they're very much into everything that's happening. Now we need to read into this plan that they're doing for the big one, because this is very important here to see what the strategy is now. So moving into it, it says, in contrast, a distant Alaska tsunami will likely result in less than 2 feet inundation, primarily affecting maritime infrastructure with 4.5 to 5 hours of initial quake. So that's how much time you got. It's not going to be much.
Really? There's a beer way to ditch the carbs.
X Ultra. 0 carbs, 100% beef.
We've got our trading account, we've got investment account, we've got the number of term deposit accounts, and we've got debit cards and credit cards. We also had FPOS facilities as well. And then they got bank facilities, make that possible.
Come up to the shop.
The inundation obviously is just coming in still slowly as things start to happen. And these waves that you're seeing right here, they happen pretty fast at king tides. It would basically occur over hours of a period of time coming from Alaska. And that's why they're saying from Alaska, they're looking at how the glaciers is melting and everything else is happening. So let's get back into everything else they're saying though. So the port of Angeles has already implemented several mitigation measures, such as burying fuel tanks underground and strengthening dock infrastructure. Now, that's a question right there. So, if they're burying fuel tanks and they're doing all this underground, how do we know that this event today wasn't something else? And so people ask the question, like in Hawaii, they said, well, we got a false alarm in Hawaii. And how is this any different? Well, the difference between Hawaii and this was that was totally different. That was for an alert when the incoming missile was happening. And basically inside of those facilities, they have to pull a lever. 2 or 3 people have to pull a lever. This is different. Seismic events gets triggered off of shaking or something happening underneath the ground or even above sometimes. So that is not equated to the same thing. I've seen some people saying that. But just reading into, I'm gonna read deeper into what we were just talking about, but I'm gonna let you see this right here. This is what they reported. USGS says Nevada quake reports was false, blaming automatic system error. United States Geological Service said Thursday's automatic earthquake detection system had erroneously sent out a report earlier in the day that a 5.9 magnitude tremor had struck Nevada, saying it was likely the first time USGS had issued a quake report and was completely bogus. Oh, yeah, so they're saying that's the first time they released a completely false report. See, this is where community comes in and is very important. If you're here and you're new here, just subscribe, stay tuned, because constantly, if we do feel something, we in the chat will say, hey, we felt something here. We saw something here. So I want to really look into the comments and I'm so interested to see what was the anomalous things. Like the chat is like a freaking storybook after this is over with. Let's go back into this though, because now that we talked about them burying fuel tanks, which I didn't know about that, let's look at what else is going on. The strategy outlines plans for enhancement, including installing additional tsunami signage and incorporating tsunami modeling. And remember, this is Washington, right? So we don't know if they're doing that in Nevada. We're just saying that if they're getting prepared there, could they be getting prepared in other area like that? Read more. Incorporating tsunami modeling data into future marina projects. The port also aims to improve cooperation with Coast Guard to ensure the successful evacuation of key assets. So they're gonna basically now they're alerting the Coast Guard. That tells you that key assets. What will those key assets be? Pretty sure probably like military bases, areas that's like government facilities. Obviously, they're not going to be looking at the homes of people. That's going to be all on you. But they're going to be getting probably the most essential stuff for economic situations. So we got to take that into account. This is just happening today. So let's read more into this because it's really giving us some insights that I wasn't aware of. I'm reading this with you in live time. James Alton, Port Angeles Airport's an emergency manager, emphasized the strategy's significance, stating that tsunami maritime strategy represents significant advancements in protecting the people, infrastructure, and maritime assets. Defined USCG Captain Mark McDonald echoed this sentiment, highlighting the collaborative effort role in enhancing understanding and proactive risk reduction. So we have this scenario now where they know the tsunami alert system is not going to be active. So they're like already preparing their routes and the most strategic things that they feel would be necessary to move. So what does that tell us? That tells us like basically after that executive order for Cascadia subduction zone, they started to get a little bit more serious. because they wasn't taking this as serious as they are now. Now with the magnetic stuff coming in, all that happening, here's the magnetic anomalies today right here. And apparently across the mid-Atlantic ridge, this could be an area that gets hit with an earthquake. And that's obviously off the East Coast. You got right in this area, you see South America, right there, or Latin America, where you want to call it, and Africa, right between that area. This is where the new subduction zone can be created. We were talking about how that part that we're looking at is going to go down in. So let's go back to it really quick. The part you're looking at, and we're not saying it's going down in right now, but we're saying like when this huge shift happened, this is the part where the plates are going to dive under and the water is going to go under, and apparently the continents in the most significant event will be pulled closer together. So basically, yeah, France and the East Coast, all this stuff, it will be slowly coming together. Question is though, like, what is going to trigger that event? It's pretty much wild to talk about, but that's something that's really already been talked about by scientists, and I've been looking into that for the longest. Outside of that, we have the solar situation, but we have South Carolina leaders urging winter weather preparedness as the state begins its readiness week. Because governors are warning that winter storms can be just as dangerous as hurricanes. So this is something that they're looking at as well. We really have a heightened December. And just the other day, I was talking about how something just started with 3i Atlas that's no one can pretty much explain. And we go deeper into the involvement with the government, with the whole strategy, the plan. And then we talk about what could the magnetic and the atmospheric effects could be. So I'm gonna read your comments here in a second. I see somebody talking about the blog, but check in the chat live right now. Something strange started with 3i Atlas and no one can explain it. If you leave this video, click that right away. Watch it because it's about survivability. Gary, I'm looking at the chat. It says Gailey Jarvis is where the blob kept appearing. So you're saying that location up top here is where that hot blob was at. Is that what you're saying? The hot blob, though, we know that once the professor said this, who's been studying seismic activity for a long time, over 30 plus years, once we continuously see the blob moving, how will we know that? The East Coast will get hit with 5.0 quakes and above. So, and you'll be around that range somewhere. So if it starts to pick up and activity is higher, then we know that that hot blob, which is moving under the mantle, which is supposed to be a rock, and is making its movements in the Appalachian area is something else that we also take into account and look at. So if you're in that area and you want to report in something, you can get that in here right now because we're this big active community looking out for each other, and I'm really glad to be here to help you do that. Some shenanigans going around, Superlord Dude says. Mark says the code 50, the 53 codex has been embedded into everything. I have to look into that. I haven't looked into that. So yeah, we'll be looking deeper into all these events. But what we get out of today's event is that we need to be more connected as community, because when these alerts go out like this, and people just say, "Oh, wait a minute, what's?"
Okay, guys, I'll just play a quick one and I'm out. I'll say good night now, though.
There's going to be hard times in the end times, and some people will die. Some Christians will do whatever it takes, and even if they have to lose their head. Revelation 20 actually gives us that indication that there were those that had their head cut off because they would not worship the false Christ. Interestingly enough, if you look at the Noahide laws, the 7 laws of Noah that are instituted by rabbinical Judaism today, by the Sanhedrin, it calls for cutting off the head of any idol worshiper. Now, when the Jews have their Christ, and you say, I believe in Jesus Christ, they're going to say, you're worshiping an idol, we're going to decapitate. There's going to be hard times in the end times, and some people will die. Some Christians will do whatever it takes, and even if they have to.
Okay, guys, it's Lupin. See you tomorrow.